There was an intimacy director on set. When they shot the scene, she said, we can just do this particular scene today, when the intimacy coordinator wasn't available. He's made a film about domestic violence because he feels that's a subject that really needs to be addressed in mainstream cinema.
All these allegations came out because he presented himself very vocally as an ally of the women's movement and all things feminist. This came as a double shock. It felt like a betrayal.
Estranged wife had asked her to go over to babysit the child, and she'd been occasionally doing it for Amanda, despite knowing that this girl is practically homeless. She used to sometimes go to the beach and sleep there.
Whenever you get a certain power, that automatically skews the balance between you and another human being.
Yeah.
How many people will stay on the straight and narrow? So Shunali, I've been following this It Ends With Us, the entire controversy with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. And it seems to be taking very interesting turns. You know, initially I was quite surprised with that New York Times article which came out, shocked in fact, because one did not expect that to have happened with Blake Lively. She's such a huge star. She was Gossip Girl, Serena van der Woodsen and all that. And after that, of course, she's done a lot of stuff. And you think, that if all this could happen to her, where does the rest of the female populace of the world stand?
And also at that time, I was, without really getting into the details of the controversy, I just skimmed through the surface of the news and I assumed, as we always tend to, that if a woman has spoken up against sexual harassment or, some indecent behavior that she has been subject to at the hands of a man, then definitely it must have happened. Okay, and it is taken for granted that the man is defending himself. But then I spent some time reading this up, and I realized that it is really, there are wheels within wheels and loops within loops. This is a really twisted story.
In a nutshell, what has happened is Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively shot for this movie, It All Ends With Us.
Which have you watched?
I haven't watched it because it was based on a very popular novel by Colleen Hoover.
That's right.
Actually talking about domestic violence, which is a very dark area, but it was, the promotions were all very frothy and romantic and put on your florals, wear your florals and go see it with your girlfriends. That's what she said. And, the promotions were very tone deaf. And then when the reports came out that many people felt very violated or disturbed when they went to watch it expecting a romantic film.
Correct.
And they found this
because
dark film.
It looked like some sort of a rom-com. But interestingly, I watched the film before the controversy broke. And I looked, this guy, firstly, is devastatingly good looking. Justin Baldoni. And I don't know what it is about his looks that made me assume very easily that he's the perpetrator of this whole sexual licentious behavior with her. But here's the thing. So the story is about, and he calls himself, just like Neil Gaiman, an ally of women, and he's a feminist. And that's why he's made a film about domestic violence, because he feels that's a subject that really needs to be addressed in mainstream cinema.
And we'll come to Neil Gaiman later.
And so now, of course, I love Blake's look in the movie because she had just delivered a child at the time. I didn't know about that. I don't follow her life that closely. And, they've just sort of whether the hair or even the costumes and the entire look doesn't look like it has been curated to present a fashionista or a Blake Lively, a fashion icon who is now playing an actor. It looks very natural to the role. But then I read up on it and I realized that the reason the promotions were fluffy, where he was speaking about domestic violence, but she wasn't, was because she didn't want to present it like that. She, right from the get-go, so there are passionate scenes between them. And there was an intimacy director on set, but when they shot the scene, I think she said, we can just do this particular scene today, when the intimacy coordinator wasn't available. And I think he pointed it out to her, and she said, no, it's fine. Then, if you read the WhatsApp exchange of messages between the two of them, his tone is very differential, and it's very, the way a junior actor will speak to a mega star. You can see that the way he's speaking to her is with respect, okay? And she's saying, this is the best set ever. This is after the kissing scene also, in the days following that. And at what stage did she decide to spin this story, if it is a spun story, is apparently because she wanted complete control over the script.
Okay.
And Ryan Reynolds decided that at some stage he can write dialogue. And he's a writer too, but this is not his film. And she wanted some sort of so she, when you're working with a big star like her, then, and they're a power couple between her and Ryan,
And Reynolds,
then you dictate your terms. And she wanted to show up in these really elaborate and expensive shoes that were costing about $5,000. So at that point, this Justin is the director as well, right? Justin is the one who put his foot down, and he said, no, this isn't going to work with the character you're playing. She's not that wealthy. So they had a lot of differences, and she was just meant to be an actor at the time, but she wanted to exert her influence at every level. And there are proof he submitted after the smear campaign against him started. It started with the New York Times article. And of course he sued New York Times.
Yes.
And then he's also sued, so he was immediately, his talent management company basically decided to not represent him. She didn't want him to show up at the premiere. Her condition was that I will only arrive at the premiere if he's not there. So he came with his wife and some 12 other people from the team who have also spoken against her.
Okay.
And he came with them, but to a separate area where there was a small little party going on at his expense, while he's also paying for the bigger premiere party, but he's not allowed to attend it. And when she went to the London premiere, she promoted some hair care brand in the middle of her own movie premiere, and Ryan Reynolds promoted some gin brand. This is all happening when they should instead only be talking about what they feel about, what she feels about domestic violence, and how important the movie is to her. So it seems to me that at some stage she realized that she can't control the script, and she had her own editor, by the way. She said, I'm going to have it edited by my own editor. And he succumbed and yielded to the pressure. And he said, fine, but I'm going to do it with mine. And they decided that they'll show it to people and see whose edited version was better. What kind of actor has that kind of a control on a film?
Somebody who's a superstar in her own right.
And who's a bully.
Okay.
Who's a
Now,
bully?
while all this is maybe true,
It's in public domain.
It's in public domain. I am just playing devil's advocate here from what little I understood of the case. There was somebody hired, a publicist hired by Baldoni.
That's right.
To take Blake Lively down to do a smear campaign against her. That happened before all this broke out.
No. It happened after everything, after the premiere.
After the premiere.
When he realized.
Before the New York Times article.
No, before the article. But what he did was, if someone is busy, if a power couple is busy making you unemployable, and then you hire somebody who says, I know how to do this, and I will fight this battle for you, and I'll change the public perception, at least within people in the know. That's what it was.
Okay.
So the smear campaign was first just verbal, and it was just...
It was a social media campaign. It went on across all platforms.
Correct.
There were articles about her tone-deaf promotion of the movie. There was a Finnish or some Scandinavian journalist who had her interview, the worst interview.
She was so rude to him.
Yeah.
She's actually, the minute I told my daughters, who are more into Gossip Girl than I've ever been, I've not even watched the whole series, they said, Mama, Blake doesn't get along with anyone. She's quite hated. So we are sure that Baldoni has been wronged, and he's in the right.
Yeah, and Leighton Meester, am I saying that right?
That's right.
She is the actually well-loved one, and she was the nasty one on that show.
Exactly. She said, blondes are always, something she said pro-blonde and anti-brunettes on the show where she was sitting right next to her.
And that having been said, there was a
She's
scene.
snarky.
Okay.
I've been watching some of her interviews for the sake of this podcast, and Blake Lively is a very snarky person.
That interview was pretty bad, and she was pretty nasty in that interview, and she's apologized for it. She said that interview came out on a bad day. That apart, there was a particular scene, a birthing scene, where she was not supposed to be nude, but he compelled her to be nude, and
Yeah.
he had his friends come and sit in and watch that scene.
Yeah, so I didn't read up on that,
So
Kiran.
that is something which also disturbs me if it was a close set.
Also, you can be a nasty person, but that doesn't save you from being subjected to a predator. There are two different
Yeah,
things,
yeah,
yeah?
absolutely.
So,
So,
but we are, but where the nastiness is relevant is in the bullying that has happened, because reams and reams of the WhatsApp conversation has been submitted.
true.
And I heard his lawyer speak and read excerpts out of that conversation. They've shown them all on YouTube and for your consumption. And nowhere does it sound like this is an offended party at any stage.
Okay. Now, the other thing that I sort of worry
But this birthing thing, I don't know. We
Yeah.
should, yeah.
So this is what I read, that there was a scene, a birthing scene, where she was made to she was told she had to be nude in that scene for whatever reason, and somebody was on the set who was friend of Baldoni, and that's how the clause then came in, that no friends or no people who are not associated with
Possible.
are allowed to be on the set, and they're not to discuss their genitalia or their porn fetishes with her.
Yeah, that I think, to me, that was a red flag,
Yeah.
okay? The
So-
fact that he discussed his previous porn addiction with her.
Yeah, that is not a very professional thing
But
to
you
do.
know, when they were shooting that scene where she says that he went on kissing her, he has revealed, because they were recording everything, they were mic'd up, right? He has revealed that entire recording.
Yeah.
And apparently, when you listen to that or read the transcript of that, nowhere does it sound like coercion. Nowhere does it sound like.
How do I smell? You smell. I smell a spray tan.
Your
and
nose is so big.
Our noses are so big.
Yeah.
And it's just playful banter that's happening between the two of them. And what worries me is that after this came out, she and Ryan Reynolds have set out a gag order against him. They've asked for a gag order against
they
him,
have?
him and his lawyer. My thing is, I don't know about the legalities of the case, but if you are in the right, why would you have a gag order issued?
Exactly.
Why would you do that?
That's what I'm saying. That at first I told my girls, I say, I always choose to side with the woman. Okay, it takes a lot to speak up against a predatory man. They said, Mom, please, she's a big star. I said, even so. But then, where do we consume this kind of information? Now, she's best friends with Taylor Swift. She's hobnobs with the who's who. She's the who's who herself, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that any halfway intelligent man who is acting opposite a woman of her power, who's one half of a power couple,
Would not dare.
who is himself married, would not dare unless he's totally lost his mind.
About believing the woman.
Mm-hmm.
That tends to be my default mode too.
Mine too, yeah.
Yeah. But when this whole Me Too thing broke,
Yeah.
I did see a lot of instances when there was just plain petty getting back.
Yeah.
When a relationship didn't work out,
Yeah.
or when you wanted to take down somebody,
Yeah.
or when you were denied a promotion. And I've had
Or denied a gig.
Yeah. I have had conversations with police officers where they've told me, off the record, of course, that of all the cases of harassment, sexual harassment that come, many are false cases. There's up to 80% could be false cases. But because the laws are so strict, we have to take them down and we have to follow up and we have to investigate. So I have become a person who sort of errs on the side of caution now. And I know harassment is all too common. We've all been there. We've all worked in places where we've had predators. But I also want to now wait a while and see all sides before I come to any conclusion
Yeah.
about anything. And then you have something like a Neil Gaiman.
Oh my God, yeah.
That comes out, that really breaks your heart, because I loved his
Can you
writing.
tell people who Neil Gaiman
Yeah,
is?
Neil Gaiman
And since
is-
you're a fan of his work.
He's an author who writes in the space of fantasy,
And comic also.
fantasy, Sandman, The Good
Good
Omens, Coraline, the Ocean at the End of the Road, the American Gods.
It's totally up your alley, isn't it? This kind of.
Totally, totally.
I don't read
And
fantasy.
yeah, and he's a brilliant writer. He's done Norse mythology as well. I've read a lot of his stuff and I've enjoyed a lot of his stuff, and so much so that, I would say, a fangirl.
Yeah,
And
you
I
were. I
can,
know that for a
yeah.
fact.
And when all these allegations came out, because he presented himself very vocally as an ally of the women's movement and all things feminist, this came as a double shock. It felt like a betrayal. He has maintained, okay, now the allegations coming from multiple women, very
Yeah.
young women who are fans, who've been nannies with his family. He has had it. He's been in an open marriage with his wife, Amanda
Yeah,
Palmer,
Amanda
and they
Palmer.
have somehow she has been also in some grotesque way involved in
But they were
procuring the girls
no, no.
for
They were
him.
so I
They
listened
were
to the entire
separated, yeah,
podcast. They were
separated
separated,
at that point.
and Amanda Palmer became friends with this girl where she worked in a perfume shop. And Amanda Palmer is a very friendly person, and she's written a book about um, ask for help or something. It's called
Okay.
basically, and so she's the sort of person who goes around. She says, "Don't hesitate to make friends and ask for help." That's her life philosophy. That's how she befriended this girl. And she wasn't a nanny yet, but Amanda Palmer started asking her over to come and she said, "Oh, this is your friend." She texted her at first. To give the listeners some context, Scarlett,
The the girl.
the girl who's has she filed a charge against him?
I don't know about that.
Well, anyway, the girl, so this 22-year-old girl,
She has made these
she'd made these
allegations.
allegations against Neil Gaiman that she had gone to his house for the first time. His estranged wife had asked her to go over to babysit the
Babysit the
child,
child.
and she'd been occasionally doing it for Amanda, as it is in New Zealand. And Amanda, despite knowing that this girl is practically homeless, she had left her biological family. It was a very violent family, and she used to sometimes go to the beach and sleep there. So this is a young, impressionable, and homeless girl. She goes to babysit on the little island where he lives. And then he tells her, there's a tub outside under the tree.
Why
If you
don't you
want,
go
why
in
don't you use it? And then he goes and sits on her, and the rest is all there
public domain?
in public domain. This is all there on a podcast on Tortoise Media.
And also in multiple publications
But this is
now.
where the story
It's
broke, and now
started.
it's on the cover of the New York Times Magazine,
Vulture.
Vulture. So call me master, because that's his bedroom line. Call me master. That's what he said. And Kiran, all the WhatsApp exchange after the sexual encounter, it continued, and now this girl is in awe of him. And then I went over the entire WhatsApp exchange between the two of them. Clearly, I'm very jobless. This is all I do. Blake Lively exchange, Neil Gaiman exchange.
We are all living vicariously through
Yeah.
everybody's scandals.
So
We are the
she,
warriors of the
so
world.
for this exchange, this girl has actually reached out to him and said that, basically saying things like she misses him and she wants him to do wild things to her, and he's unleashed an animal inside her, blah, blah, blah. And in response, his response is very measured, because after a few weeks of this affair, he went away to London. And if you realize that it's all about consent, and consent is a little more nuanced than a yes or a no, and a man in a position of power knows that this young girl is bichari, she's helpless, homeless, and dependent on me. And also, women confuse falling for a man in a position of power. Young women with the feelings sort of get all sorts of.
There are also some daddy issues involved.
Right. So I'm just also saying that to fall in love with, if you don't know if you're actually in love with him, or it's the glamour, or it's the wealth, what it is. But there's a very big age gap between the two. Neil is
40s odd, 47 odd? No, more than that.
no,
No,
he's
his wife.
62. No,
No, he's 62. I'm
he's
sorry,
62. Yeah,
my mistake.
Neil Gaiman is
His-
62.
his wife is, yeah.
And so this girl has enjoyed this affair that they've had, and for a woman who doesn't understand that the consent is a very, very complex issue, you may believe when you read the exchange that she was absolutely on board with it. She was totally fine with it. She was in love with him, but he did not show enough sensitivity towards this relationship at a certain stage, is when she has decided to
Come into public with
come
it.
into public with it. But the thing is, a young girl like that,
There's an imbalance of power.
and this man, a complete imbalance of power, and this man knows that, this is a kid, and I should be a little more careful with what I'm doing. And the first time, there was no consent involved at all.
Hmm. And the scariest line in that entire thing was, there is no safe word.
There's no safe. And then with another girl, much younger, years ago, who's come out with another story,
A fan.
there was BDSM
Yes, there was-
involved.
yeah.
And there was no safe word there as well. And in fact, she went through a very, very painful sexual encounter
With him.
with him for a long time. So he also saw, and he said, "Call me master" to her also. And that's why the cover story is called Call Me Master.
Call Me
My
Master.
God.
And this really brings us back to the debate that we had with about Alice Munro, and so many creators whose work you love. How do you respond to their work? Do you separate the work from the artist, or do you think the artist and his sensibilities inform the work, and therefore, as somebody with a conscience, you should not be enjoying the work or reading the work? It's a very nuanced
I feel that an artist
decision to
doesn't
make.
have to be a custodian of society's models, okay? He doesn't have to be. But
What is unforgivable and what is forgivable?
no, I'm just saying, firstly, artists are human beings. Art can come from a very, very dark and complicated place, right?
It has to come from a dark and complicated place. Most artists forget the tortured souls. If they are not tortured themselves, they're torturing somebody
That's
else.
what I'm saying. So I'm saying that if art comes from a very dark and complex place, and if an artist is someone who captures your imagination and your deepest fears and your wildest fantasies on paper or on canvas, that is a craft and that is a talent, right? That is his art. Why does that mean that he also has to be this righteous human being who conducts himself responsibly and morally at all times? Where is the connection? Yes, I know he's famous, so he's in a position to influence a vast majority of people.
Does his artistic ability absolve him of being
It doesn't. So
moral?
one should act more responsibly, and yet we have to understand, we have to stop being surprised when this happens. That's what I'm saying. He's not God.
One doesn't expect him to be God, but one expects a certain morality in terms
The
of.
problem here is that he openly used to be a feminist.
Yeah.
And so was Amanda. And they've
That feels
indulged in
like
threesomes and all sorts of things that they've exploited other people. This is what I read in the article, which was, or I think on the podcast.
See, as long as everything is consensual, there's no issue. But the moment it becomes
No,
exploitative,
no. When you're with a much younger person, then the whole conversation of consent also changes, no, Kiran? Don't we know of much older, powerful men who've been in a so-called consensual relationship with very young girls
I've just come back from
and
Thailand.
then destroyed them? No, so I'm saying that on the one hand, it is consensual, but that girl has no agency. Her feelings are mixed up. She doesn't have the emotional maturity to decide for herself. And to separate her feelings of, being infatuated with somebody versus, admiring somebody versus some daddy complex. So I'm just saying that play a match with somebody your own size.
But that would not be so attractive, right?
Which is why, and I read something in that Vulture article, it was quite telling. So when he did these comic signings, where he used to show up at all these events, now there were these young fans who used to queue up, and he was very civil and he would flirt with them, and then of course he'd,
Take one home.
take one home. And someone much younger than him. And they said that, the people who sort of go to these events, who are obsessed with comic characters, are people who are confused about their own identities, and they are hiding behind the identity, or they are assuming the identity of some comic character. So they said the psyche and the psychology of a person like that is already very vulnerable. The kind of frenzied fan is somebody who's already very vulnerable. I know you're a fan. But you're not a frenzied fan.
No, no,
You
I'm not
weren't like
very
seeing
young.
Neil
No,
Gaiman and,
no, no, and I'm not that young also to be of.
So no, I'm just saying that admiring somebody and being a fan is different from being an obsessive fan. And an obsessive fan is someone who's vulnerable. And those are the people he has exploited. So then it is just a question of you're not a very decent human being at all, whether you're an artist or not. It goes a lot beyond.
But there are very few men who, when given that power, whether through their art or whether through politics or whether through money, can remain decent human beings. If you see, whenever you get a certain power, that automatically skews the balance between you and another human being.
Yeah.
How many people will stay on the straight and narrow?
Yeah, so the dynamic changes. And when the dynamic changes, then you think everything is
Open game for you. What a tragedy.